Ladies and gentlemen, One Piece Chapter 1111 is released, and we have a lot to talk about to digest before this 3 week break, including some stuff with some fighting, some potential lore drops, some straw hats. So let's just jump right into it. So I want to start off talking about this interaction that we start with Mars, I believe, is the bird, and Jinbei and Zoro and Lucci. Super cool art panel with Lucci just getting like all the scars on his stomach. I thought that was pretty cool. But I kind of found myself a little lost with this Jinbei interaction. I was wondering like, are we really gonna have like some kind of conflict between Zoro and Jinbei because Jinbei like took Zoro away from the fight? It feels very out of place, especially amongst all like the clutter that's going on already with everything happening in this arc. So this almost felt like a, what is the purpose of including this in this chapter? But I will welcome it if it ends up being cool character progression for anybody. Like I think One Piece almost lacks in that in the post time skip, so I'll welcome it if it ends up working out. But what's even more interesting about this interaction, for me at least, is Rob Lucci's conversation with Mars. I'm gonna keep saying, I'm pretty sure his name is Mars the bird. If it's wrong, that's who I'm talking about. I'm talking about the bird. I think it's very, very interesting to see someone touted as a psychopath who just kills and kills and kills, like Rob Lucci, to ask for his superior to spare his partner. I thought that was pretty interesting. And I think the juxtaposition of him kind of like giving this like really crucial information, like filling his role as like an intelligence agent to Mars, but then in the same vein asking Mars to spare his friend is super interesting for Rob Lucci. I didn't really I thought Rob Lucci in this arc was just going to be fan service from Oda, just like throwing us like a bone for like an old character that we love. But it looks like there's actual character progression happening, or potential character progression being set up here. It also could just be setting a stage for Mars to be shown as like a very evil Gorosei member, like he's going to kill Kaku anyway. It could be just setting up for that. Either way, I thought this conversation was very interesting. I wasn't expecting this kind of dynamic from two people on the same side. I'm interested to see if we're going to even see the interaction between Kaku and Mars. I think we're obviously going to have to see Mars shut down Vegapunk's transmission, and if Kaku's in that room, maybe he plays a part in that. But definitely some interesting setup there. I'm very intrigued as to where we're going with that, or what Oda was trying to set up. So the next big thing in this chapter I want to talk about is Luffy's reunion again with the Giants. I feel like we've had this like reunion type of panel like a bunch of times, but I'll welcome it. I think it's pretty fun. What did have me confused though is that the Giants say something about like, where did you learn about how he looked, referring to the sun god Nika and Luffy, which the first time we saw the Giants, I felt like they knew Luffy was the sun god. Like, oh, should we call you sun god? Like, it felt like they knew, like, oh, this Luffy is the chosen one. But here in this panel, I kind of got the vibe that they're saying like, oh, why are you like cosplaying as the sun god, or like, why we didn't know you were inspired by the sun god, rather than thinking he is the sun god, right? Maybe that's something they find out in Elbaf, but it also could just be like a translation error, or like the way they translated this made me feel like the Giants don't really actually know he's Nika. But it also, there's kind of a plot hole there if that's the case, because if they know who Nika is, they should know what Nika's powers are, or something along those lines. And as we'll get to later in the chapter, the combat is very clearly the freedom of rubber that Nika possesses, right? Like, and the Giants see that happening. So kind of confusion here about whether the Giants really know that Luffy is Nika, or they just think he is like also inspired by Nika like they are. Regardless, I think we're gonna get that answered, so I'm not too worried about it. I also love when Oda does like the little island schematics and shows us where everyone's at, because it is starting to get confusing. That was right next to this panel. I love how we now know where everyone's at, where everyone's trying to go, why it's taking them so long to reconvene, what they have to go through in order to get to the boat. I also love how it says like goal Elbaf ship. Like, it didn't really dawn on me how close we are to Elbaf. Like, we've been waiting for that arc for so long, and now we see like the Elbaf ship. Like, it's like just like confirmed that we're going there. I was like freaking out just at that little detail. I thought that was pretty cool. And then we get this Conquerors Hockey roar from Mercury, or the Hoki, the Boar, whatever you want to call him. I think everyone has kind of been on the same page with the Gorosei rankings of strength. Not where they land amongst other characters, but more amongst the 5 Gorosei who are the strongest. I still think they're all relative to each other, like they're very close, but if there's going to be a strongest one, I think it's going to be Mercury. He gets more dialogue, he's always in the center, and like the middle person in One Piece always seems to be the strongest. So I think it's definitely confirmed that he's like the strongest here. What I'm kind of wondering is like, again, like everyone's wondering, are these devil fruits? What is this new like hockey that's being portrayed? I'm just kind of still hovering on the, if this guy's Conquerors Hockey is so strong, like we see as this chapter goes on, like everyone's like, oh, wow, what is that Conquerors Hockey? The island's going crazy. And like we see this like huge Conquerors Hockey like explosion, right? We learned last arc in Wano that the application of Conquerors Hockey to your blows or your attacks is the strongest form of like power in the series. If the Gorosei really are this much of a threat, I don't really understand why like we're building up their hockey to be so strong, but then they don't have that extra step that we learned last arc is like limited to like the strongest characters in the series. I just feel like the concept of advanced Conquerors Hockey has been thrown out the window this entire arc. It's making me very confused, especially with the emphasis on hockey with the Gorosei. Like I said, like Oda is putting so much emphasis into showing us that like the hockey of the Gorosei is insane, but we know that the next step, or like the strongest deciding factor of if someone's hockey really is strong, is if they can apply Conquerors Hockey to their attacks, and we're just not seeing that. So it kind of leaves that gap in my mind of like of strength. Like it's very hard for me to determine how strong these characters are if we're not seeing like the one ability touted as the greatest of them all not be used, despite their Conquerors Hockey being like on full display. Is very, very confusing to me. And I think in that same vein, something I also thought that was pretty interesting that I think I actually kind of like is the difference in portrayal of the Gorosei compared to other times when other villain groups in One Piece have shown up. I think when a One Piece villain is introduced, like historically, for the first time, I mean, like the first time they show up and like do something crazy, they're always very in control. They're not under a lot of pressure. They're not panicking. They typically are like think back to Doflamingo, Kaido, NL, Crocodile. They're like the first time those characters like showed their powers and showed their strength, they were very in control and like wiped the floor with somebody. I'm actually really liking how the first time we see the Gorosei, they're like panicking. They're getting tossed around by the Giants and Luffy. They're struggling to get to this place that they need to shut off the transmission for. It's a very new perspective that I think really makes me feel a sense of appreciation to how far Luffy has come. Like I think it's really interesting to see this horrifying group of villains introduced look incredibly badass and like really apply a pressure of this is the end of One Piece to the story, yet still struggle against our main character and like kind of have a hard time against our protagonist group. Like I think that's just testament to how far we've come, and I think that's really cool. I also want to bring up how a couple chapters ago I complained that Oda was introducing these vice admirals that I just did not care about, to be honest with you, taking up panel space for characters that will likely not play a role in the story and are just like random characters that I didn't care about. And I did say in that video that if they would come back and serve a purpose or potentially give the Straw Hats like matchups, I would rescind that complaint. And I think that's what this is leading towards. We actually see some of the Vice Admirals that were introduced in front of the Elbaf boat with Usopp, Bonnie, Sanji, and Nami. And I feel like there's potential matchups coming. I now feel like there's a purpose for those characters to be introduced. I think it would be really cool for the Straw Hats that don't typically fight, like Nami, Chopper, Usopp, even Bonnie to get some fighting in, to fight these characters who are Vice Admirals, right? You don't scoff at a Vice Admiral. It's a pretty high position. To see the Straw Hats like go up against those characters and potentially beat them to get off the island, I think would be super cool, especially since we never get to see any of the lower tier Straw Hats fight. I think that would be really cool, and it would just give a use to those characters that were introduced a few chapters ago instead of just having them take up panel time. So, and lastly, of course, Oda had to leave us with some kind of cliffhanger for this 3-week break, and it is the giant robot awakening and muttering, "Forgive me, Joy Boy." Now, I haven't really put a lot of thought into what this could mean, but what I do think is that it is absolutely going to tie into Vegapunk's message. I think the fact that this giant gets up anytime Luffy is in Gear 5 mode, and it's mentioning Joy Boy, and we're also about to get a Vegapunk message, like potentially about the Void Century. I think all this stuff is happening together to give us some kind of like string of connections for when that message does come out. So I would put my money on this giant being related to whatever Vegapunk has to say, potentially being a comrade of Joy Boy, right? Like we did see kind of the same type of dialogue with Zunisha, who ended up like being confirmed a comrade of Joy Boy. I kind of get the same vibe from this giant. But I just the timing of this reveal, I really don't think that Oda would make this the cliffhanger, like have the giant wake up and then have it not be related to the whole Egghead incident we've been waiting for, like the whole message that Vegapunk is going to say. So definitely look out for that. I think it's going to have more of a relevance than people think. It's not just going to be this thing that like stalls the Gorosei. I just think it's going to be more important than people think in terms of Vegapunk's message. And that is all we got for this 3-week break. We have to stew on this information until we get anything more. As far as for what comes next, I think there's still a lot of stuff that has to come from Egghead before we get the message. Like I said previously, I think the Straw Hats need to hear what Vegapunk has to say, right? Because they're fighting for this message. So that makes me believe they're going to be on the ship going to Elbaf when this message it's broadcast to the world, right? Because they have to be like in a safe place to hear it. But before we get there, we have to get those potential Vice Admiral matchups I was talking about. We have to see the Gorosei like kind of be escaped from, I guess. We also have to see, I think, Kuma die. I really don't think he's going to make it out of this arc alive, and I feel like that's going to be a big moment since he's been a very arc-centric character. There's just a lot to go off of for what we still need to see. I don't expect to come back from this 3-week break and immediately get Vegapunk's message. I think we still have like 3 or 4 at max chapters left until we get that. So until we get those, look forward to the next video.